Before this video starts, I just want to give a massive shout out to all my channel members. If you want to receive a shout out, then become a channel member today and you'll be shown on screen like all these other channel members here. Anyways, enjoy the video. On September 17th, 2014, the English version of the Battle Cats was released. I figured that the best way to celebrate this 10th anniversary is to go back in time and see how this game has evolved over all these years by looking at some of this game's most major updates, and perhaps give some prehistory too, at least relative to the current English version of the game. Seeing as this video would discuss tons of topics, I've left chapters in the description that cover various points in the history of the Battle Cats. If you found this history fascinating, then be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to my channel if you like what you see here, as it would help me out in the long run. Anyways, let's get our notebooks open and learn some history. This game has a history that actually goes all the way back to 2010, when the very first edition of this game was released. Nyanko Daisensou, or what we call nowadays as Ganso Nyanko Daisensou, was a subscription-based game made for older generations of mobile phones. According to a blog post made in 2016, this game was made when Ponos, the company that made the game, only had 9 employees total, and out of those 9, only 3 of them were even working on this game. This forced the art style to be rather simple, which is why there are very little details on any enemy featured in the Empire of Cats outside of the face. Speaking of Empire of Cats, the only stages in this game were the first chapter of Empire of Cats in challenge mode. This means that Muth, Dark Emperor Nyandem, and Teacher Bund were all absent. The only units in this game were the 9 basic cats and their evolved forms. A year later, this game would get a sequel, Kumanchu Royale, or the Battle Bears as some people might call it. This game would swap out the 9 titular basic cats with 9 new bear characters and add a whole bunch of new enemy types. The 3 most relevant ones being Mr. Mur, who was the equivalent to Hippo in this game, Sleipnir, who lacked wings and acted as the Bubblaine of this game, and most importantly, Muth, who was introduced in this game as a unique separate enemy. All 3 of these enemies would make it back to the main mobile app in some shape or form, with Muth getting to join the Empire of Cats cast, while Sleipnir and Mr. Mur would have to wait a while before they got to come back to the main mobile version. These 2 games were discontinued on January 6, 2015. In 2010, you had to pay a monthly fee of 324 Japanese yen, or $3.58 in American dollars. Here are some other conversions so my audience doesn't need to pull up their 2010 currency exchange calculators. Before the current mobile version, there was the first mobile version of this game, simply called Battle Cats. Here is where we see our first major version of the game, this obviously being version 1.0. This version took all of the features from the flip phone version and added even more content. The new additions on top of the existing units from the previous mobile version include the 13 purchasable special cats like Ninja and Sumo Cat, Valkyrie Cat, Bahamut Cat, and Maneko. This version also added the first special ability, this being the Strawn effect. This ability would allow units to deal 1.5 times damage and have 2 times the health against an enemy trait. The only trait that could get affected by Strawn were red enemies. Axe, Fish, Ninja, Zombie, Bondage, and Dom were all the units with this ability. This was also the version that added Muth, Dark Emperor Nyandem, and Teacher Bund to the game, in which Bund served as the final boss. Many enemies also had very simple names such as Doggy, Snake, Gorilla, and Rhinoceros. However, there are a few standout names and enemy descriptions that were a lot more vulgar than their current names and descriptions, with Piggy and Miss Sign being named Elizabeth and Cyborg Girl respectively, with the latter being explicitly called a slut in their description. While the old English version never got to see this, and the current English version didn't even get to see it until November of 2023, version 1.4 saw the addition of the first collaboration event, this being the Princess Punt collab. While the collab itself wasn't the largest, only adding Princess Punt and Cat Princess units, this does mark an important step in allowing this game to branch out to other games and have special collaboration events in their own game. The original English version will be removed from all stores at this point somewhere around 2013. Meanwhile, in the Japanese version, version 2.0 was the first major update this game had released since their introduction. This version added 3 significant features, the first being the true form, as all of the 9 basic cats received a true form in this update. The second feature was the introduction of Stories of Legend, adding the subchapters The Legend Begins to Castle of Fish, giving players at the time a whole bunch of new stages to play. The third and perhaps the biggest addition to this game even to this day is the gacha system. In version 2.0, there weren't any actual dedicated sets yet, but this update would add a whole bunch of new gacha units, these being Bodhisattva, Delinquent, Hip Hop, Kotatsu, Nerd, Swimmer, Pogo, Wheel, Apple, Bath, Jurassic, Viking, Pirate, Thief, Bishop, Fortune Teller, and Nekaluga. Updates were released a little bit differently back then, as instead of making a new update something like 2.1.0, they would go 2.0.1, and it would add stuff that wasn't simple bug fixes. Version 2.0.5 was the first update to add a dedicated set, being the Dynamites, with the Ubers obtainable being Ice Cat, Cat Machine, Lesser Demon Cat, Baby Cat, Marauder Cat, and Nekaluga. Nekaluga may jump out at you, seeing as Nekaluga is not a dynamite, but I will note now that until version 3.0, there wasn't a dedicated Nekaluga set, so from version 2.0 to 3.3, you could pull Nekaluga from any set in the game. The last thing I'll cover in the 2.0 series is the addition of the first gacha collab set, with Princess Punt receiving their own gacha set and adding 5 units, this being Swordsman, Cow Princess, Logao, Reaper, and the Uber of the set, PPT-48. September 17th, 2014, the fateful day that saw the re-release of the English version of the Battle Cats to iOS and Android devices outside of Japan. In Korea, because they got their own version a few months back, but that's not really relevant to this video. This version was synced to the JP's 3.0 update, but was still considered version 1.0.0. When version 4.0 came out, the English version got it as version 3.0. The Battle Cats updates became synced with the Japanese version, at least in terms of what the number was in version 5.0, but I'm getting a bit ahead of myself because I just jumped a few major updates, so what were in some of these updates anyways? Version 3.0 had added the user rank system. This user rank system would grant several rewards for upgrading enough units, usually in increments of 100 user rank per reward. The biggest of these rewards would be able to finally level up units past level 20 without needing plus levels. While this today might seem rudimentary, back when these user rank rewards were added, this would allow most units to go past level 20. For example, Ring Girl will now be able to go from 18,600 health to 26,350 health, a massive 41% boost to their health. This would also allow them to go from 8.5k damage to 12.1k damage, allowing them to be especially potent against black enemies due to their 3 times damage boost. Version 4.0 was the next major update to the game, as this update adds the first major story chapter since version 1.0 with the addition of Into the Future and the addition of alien enemies. This gave room for Ponos to truly experiment with a whole new set of stages that don't need to be integrated with other event stages. A new story saga also came along with new treasure effects. The main ones of interest are the crystal and the fruit treasures. The 2 alien crystals were a way to make aliens weaker over the course of the Into the Future journey, allowing the player to have an easier time facing them. These treasures would also aid in getting time score rewards much more easily, and there was a massive incentive to get these rewards, as these all had 10 cat food as the highest reward, alongside other great rewards like battle items, XP, and even normal and rare tickets. The fruits were the second major treasure category added, as these would boost some units' abilities against specific traits. Specifically, the traits with treasures include Red, Black, Floating, and Angel. The stat-based abilities receive a boost to their stats depending on what said ability was. On screen now, you can see the extra boost in stats for Strong, Massive Damage, and Resist abilities. I add the math of the treasures available at the time and the modern day boosts with 300% treasures to give an idea on how much these stats would have gotten boosted by. As for the crowd control effects, Freeze and Slow would get a 6.7% boost to their effect length, while Weaken got a 3.3% boost, though it should be stated that the Weaken duration got updated at an unknown date to match the boost of the other effects. Knockback also gained an additional 6.7% distance boost with the treasures, though once again this was changed to a 10% distance boost per 100% treasure at an unknown date. These allowed specialized units of these traits to be stronger against said trait. There was another major feature added in this version, this being the cat combo feature. This feature allowed you to put select units in the top row of your lineup and would be granted certain bonuses. Some of these boosted raw stats, ability effects, things related to the wallet or the cap base, or even other things such as unit cooldowns. While this system was rather niche in most cases back then, this feature would, over the years, get more and more powerful as the years go on. The topic of cat combos will return a little bit later, but we have to move on to the addition of one of the most influential true forms in the game. While version 4.2 added a new saga of Into the Future and some new enemies into the true form of Valkyrie, this edition was nothing in comparison to what version 4.5 added. This was the update that added Into the Future Chapter 3 alongside perhaps one of the most influential true forms ever. This was the introduction of Awakened Bahamut. What was once a simple backliner nuker became a speed demon that the game hadn't seen up to this point, with the closest thing being War God Yukimura, but outside his designated trait, his damage output wasn't the highest in the world. Awakened Bahamut gave players a unit that would reshape the entire idea of stage design following his addition. 85,000 damage that could be dished out very easily, and with a rebound and a high knockback count would allow him to shred most enemies, if not cripple them in a matter of seconds. Bahamut became perhaps the most used unit in the game outside of meat shields due to being one of the few units at the time that could truly deal potent damage in this short period of time. Awakened Bahamut also came just in time as a new attack type was being added to the game. This being the LD ability or long distance ability in version 4.6, adding the first enemies and units with said abilities. These units being Prisoner and Aphrodite, as well as version 4.7 adding LD enemies with Mr. Mole, Cruel Angel Cleonel, and the Perfect Cyclone. The addition of Cruel Angel Cleonel also brought advent stages along with them, stages where you could get very powerful units locked behind extremely tough stages. Version 4.7 was also the update that axed a whole bunch of cat combos. Pretty much all of the axe combos featured more than one gacha unit, so axing them was perhaps a way to comply with Japanese law when it came to the limits of what you could do with these sorts of gacha units. If you want to learn more about these removed cat combos, you can check out my video where I discussed every single removed cat combo. Version 5.0 was another major update for several reasons. The first being the addition of the Uberfest set, which was a new way for players to more easily collect a wide variety of Ubers from various sets, alongside an elusive Fest unit in the form of Mighty Lord Gao, a unit with above average standing range that dealt very impressive damage to most enemies and was very bulky against them as well. However, the bigger thing that was added was the cat freak system. Prior to this, only the basic cats, purchasable cats, Valkyrie, Bahamut, the oddball collab unit, and some of the monthlies had a true form. Now this gives gacha units a way to acquire a true form, and to say the true forms added in this update were quite the group added, as 26 whole true forms were added, with most of these being gacha units. To give a list of all the gacha true forms added, we have Tathagata Cat, Ultraland Pastaland, Luxury Bath Cat, Ice Crystal Cat, Balrog Cat, Maximum the Fighter, Dread Pirate Catly, Doctor Cat, Cats in the Cradle, Immortal Kaiji, Divine Windy and Divine Thundia, God Emperor Megidora, the Peach Devils, and Inferno Akira. Now if you counted, you would have noticed that I only mentioned 14 out of the 26 true forms added this update. This was because we had also gotten the Crazed Cat true forms, adding some of the most difficult stages in the game at this point, from Unjust War to Muscle Party and Forest Beasts. These stages would test the limits of the units available in the game at the time. Nurse Wuffa is a great channel to see just how much of these units were pushed to their limits at the time, especially for their Forest Beast guide, which is quite literally an hour long. Oh, and I guess Kissing Koi and Madam the Savannah were added too, that's cool I guess. You drove them deep into the heart of the enemy base. You thought they were dead. You were wrong. Version 5.6 would see the introduction of a brand new enemy type that was the most unique trait yet, these being the zombie enemy type. Zombies were an enemy type that brought two unique features that made them truly unique, these being the ability to burrow and the ability to resurrect. Zombies that can burrow will reach your most upfront unit and dig into the ground to travel a specific length of distance before popping up further into your defense, causing your defense to be split into two. The second unique ability is the resurrection ability. Instead of dying, zombies would enter a corpse state where after a specific amount of time, they would come back to life with a specific percentage of their max health, and depending on the enemy, they can resurrect multiple times. However, to help counteract this undead Scrooge would be some new units that had a new ability, this being the Zombie Killer ability. This ability would allow these units to bypass the corpse state that zombies have, and the ability would come with a distinct visual effect and sound cue if a zombie killer was the one who got the final blow. The new undead horde has also been reported to be spreading across the world, causing undead outbreaks where you would need to go and clean up the undead horde. There was some incentive to do these outbreaks, as for every outbreak you cleared, you would receive 10 cat food, and if you cleared every single outbreak in Empire of Cats Chapter 1, you would get a boost to your energy cap by 50. If you also clear every outbreak stage that is needed for a treasure, you can get a boosted treasure chance, giving you an easier time getting said treasure. Though this function of the outbreaks is somewhat forgotten, since by the time you could do some of these outbreak levels anyways, you would probably have all of the superior treasures that you need. Version 6.0 serves as the real next major update to the game, with 2 core features being added. The first of these being the multi-hit function, meaning units and enemies can now attack more than once during an attack cycle. For example, Awake of Bahamut went from being able to deal 85,000 damage to 93,000 damage due to being able to use the other 2 swings in his attack animation. Other units, alongside enemies, had received the multi-hit function as well, making some enemies more dangerous to fight. This also came with the addition of the new dedicated Uber set that would use multi-hits as the set gimmick. This of course being the Girls and Monsters set, for which every Uber has a multi-hit attack. However, the real main addition of the update was the addition of the Untoten development team. This group of ragtag engineers would allow modifications to the cat base itself, allowing for the creation of 3 distinct cannon types alongside the base cat cannon we all know and love. These cannons that were added include the Slow Beam, a cannon that affects every enemy on the field and will slow all enemies for up to 50 frames or 1.67 seconds. Remember that back then the level limit for upgrades was level 10. The Iron Wall acts as an emergency shield deploy that could stall all enemies for a period of time, and this wall had a limited amount of hits it could take. Last was the Thunderbolt cannon, which would freeze all enemies in a given area that started from where your furthest unit was from the base. The freeze time it could go up to was a second and dealt 39% of the cannon's regular power. This was helpful in giving you a brief period of time to breathe, especially against aggressive enemies, or to help set up a crowd control unit to further stall an enemy. This update had a massive campaign around it, with Ponos giving away a rare ticket and 50 cat food if their posts on Facebook and Instagram got 6,000 likes, plus a lucky individual would win a tank cat plush. Now that has me wondering, if you were indeed that lucky winner, I'd be highly interested in knowing how you felt that you won said plush. 2 updates later would see the addition of a brand new, never before seen event map called the Heavenly Tower, which was home to some of the most difficult stages in the entire game, including perhaps one of the most well-liked stages in the game, Floor 30, featuring Hermit Cat. The boss was essentially the most difficult stage in the entire game, as it required the player to have some sort of wave immune attacker, which was super rare back in the day. If you were unlucky with the gacha and didn't have a unit like Akira, Kaiji, Shishilan, or Shadow Gao, then you would have to rely on Musashi as your wave immune attacker. The peon support required expertly crafted lineups that could quickly quash these strong peons, with units like Maglev, Manic Island, Kung Fu, and Butterfly Cat being common options. If you want to get an even more detailed explanation on how truly insane this stage was at the time, and even somewhat nowadays, may I recommend watching Lucas the Force video he released on this stage after you're done watching this one. Besides the absolutely insane difficulty of Floor 30 being the main highlight, this tower also allowed Ponos to really experiment with using enemies they wouldn't really use anywhere else, such as monthly enemies, cyclone bosses, and awakened cat enemies to create some truly unique stage combinations for the time. The tower itself would grant plenty of resources, from power-ups to cat tickets, cat fruit, and even cat's eyes, giving massive incentive for the player to play these stages. Version 6.5 adds a brand new story saga to the game, just as version 4.0 did with Into the Future. This time, adding the Cats of the Cosmos. This new story saga adds a new type of alien enemy, this being the starred alien. These aliens, while sharing the same trait as their unstarred counterparts, required a new set of crystals to make them weaker, and this required even more treasures, as this would take 5 whole crystals to make them as weak as possible. These starred aliens also brought 2 unique abilities along with them, these being the barrier and the warp abilities. A barrier acts as a shield that can only be broken with a unit whose damage output was higher than the barrier's health, and barrier breakers. Warp is an ability that makes it so if a unit was hit by an enemy that can warp, they would be teleported back a certain distance for a specific period of time. For example, Start Paying would teleport your units away for 3.33 seconds and send them back 500 range, forcing the unit that got teleported to crawl their way back to the front lines. This saga also added fruit treasures for metal, zombie, and alien enemies, meaning that now these traits can also have boosted effects against them, similar to the fruit treasures of Into the Future. This left traitless is the only fruitless trait in the game. Stories of Legend as a saga had been going on since version 2.0 and was approaching close to its 48th chapter. Many people were speculating on what would happen during the 48th subchapter, as there had been a common theme in the story sagas to have 48 stages, so many people were believing that Stories of Legend would be coming to a close, especially as the last subchapters at the time were Singularityville and Ends of the Earth, which very much gave off "we are getting close to the end" vibes from the subchapter names. Then version 7.0 drops, and the predictions would be correct, as The Legend Ends was the last subchapter of Stories of Legend, and it didn't appear there was another subchapter after this. However, upon clearing Unkept Promises, a new subchapter is unlocked with the Laboratory of Relics, which harbored the real final boss of Stories of Legend. This of course being Mecha Bun, a devastating floating enemy that will kill almost anything it comes into contact with, requiring immense crowd control to stop this thing's rampage. Once you did beat this stage, however, you would be greeted with the credits congratulating you for beating Stories of Legend. But then you would be greeted with both a message saying all of your previous legend units you collected can now be true formed, and a new saga called Uncanny Legends was now available. This introduced a whole new saga in a new legend, along with a new enemy type that plays a major role for this saga called a Relic enemy. The two enemies introduced at the time include Relic Doge and Relic Bun Bun, the former of which was teased in the Laboratory of Relics. Seeing as these were a new trait, there was a real lack of counters for this trait. Relic enemies also brought along a new ability in the form of Curse, an ability that could shut down special abilities that target enemy traits such as massive damage or freeze. Nowadays, we're spoiled with things like UL True Forms and Euro True Form, but back then, these things were absolute beasts of an enemy type, and the only real counters at the time were in fact those very True Forms that you just unlocked for beating Stories of Legend. This process also included needing to acquire a brand new cat fruit called the Elder Cat Fruit in the Growing Strange event map. The stage would start off by dropping you into a stage with a wide array of enemy targets, then it would give you one of 7 stages that focused on a particular trait, these being Red, Floating, Black, Angel, Alien, Metal, and Zombie. These stages varied in difficulty depending on your lineup, but the general advice given was to make a lineup that could tackle 2 to 4 of these stages, as this was the general limit most people could achieve with the units available. This was a major criticism of Growing Strange, as many people found the randomness of what stage you would get, and the fact that 99% of the time, you would only get an Elder Cat Fruit seed, meaning that if you wanted to get one of the few relatively accessible anti-relic units, you best believe you're playing these stages for a long while. Though you could get lucky with the 1% chance of getting the fruit itself, effectively cutting down how many times you need to play Growing Strange by 4. This update was one of the most hyped updates yet, as we finally received the end of Stories of Legend, the true forms for the Stories of Legend units, and a whole new saga and enemy trait, but Growing Strange was definitely a bump in the road for some. Some updates go by, expanding Uncanny Legends, adding new units and true forms as usual, and then comes version 8.0. Version 8.0 comes in swinging and adds another game-changer mechanic that will shape the meta as a whole, and gives Ponos a way to add additional buffs to already existing units. This of course being the talent system, unlocked after beating Into the Future Chapter 3. This talent system added a new currency called NP that would be used to unlock these new buffs. The way you would obtain it is by exchanging units pulled from the gacha, similar to exchanging them for XP, and depending on the rarity, it would give a different amount of NP. Basic and special units would go for 1 NP, rare units would go for 5, super rares would go for 15, uber rares went for a massive 50 NP, and legend rares gave up a massive 150 NP. Speaking of those legend rares, there were a new addition to this update. Legend rares would be on average 10 times rarer than even an Uber, but these legend rares would be specialized in dealing with several traits through newly added abilities. These being insane damage, giving a 5 to 6 times boost in damage against a trait, and insane resist, allowing a unit to have 6 to 7 times their health against a specific trait. Now back to the talents, there were 12 units that were gifted talents upon release. These units being Tathagata, Cancan, Catasaurus, Enchantress, Katar, Immortal Nobunaga, Divine Windy and Thundia, God Emperor Saddam and Megidora, Immortal Shingen, and Cataphone. These 12 received a wide range of abilities that helped them have better performance against their traits, gave them new targets entirely, or even gave them other boosts like cost reduction and extra immunities. The costs for each of these talents were determined on 3 conditions. If the talent was a resist talent, or an ability that would buff an already existing attribute, such as Enchantress's Slow, then it would cost a total of 75 NP to fully upgrade for rares, 125 NP for super rares, and 175 NP for uber rares. If the talent granted a new ability or effect, such as Megidora's Wave talent, then it would cost 95 NP for rares, 165 NP for super rares, and 235 NP for ubers to fully upgrade. Last were talents that added a new trait target or an upgrade that doesn't take any extra NP to upgrade, such as Kankan's Alien Targeting and Double Bounty, which would cost 50 NP for rares, 75 NP for super rares, and 100 NP for uber rares. While some of these talents were nice to have in making a unit stronger, such as Katasaurus' Crit Boost talents, some would go on to be meta-defining, such as Kankan's Double Bounty, but that's a lesson for another day. A few updates later in version 8.2, this update would add the leadership mechanic. This was a massive addition, as now this allows players to save up a lot more cat food if they wanted to continue playing, since they would no longer be spending it to refill their energy if they had a leadership. This change also made it so people would no longer hold off finishing a stage or subchapter, as some players would actually want to use the energy refill to the fullest, so now players would be given this item upon clearing an event stage or a story subchapter, letting them be even more efficient with their energy usage. Version 8.5 adds the first in-app purchase unit, this being Gummy Cat, as this unit would only be available by coughing up real cash to be obtained. This I think is worth mentioning, as it means now players would have to drop real cash if they were that invested in having a massive collection of units. Granted, not many units now have to be obtained this way, but there are a few that do. Version 9.0 adds the Meow Medal system. This mechanic is meant to serve as an achievement system, with medals being acquired as you pass certain milestones, such as beating a story chapter, defeating boss stages, spending cash in battle, to even unlocking some story-specific units. Outside of achievement progress, however, the only practical use these have are for unlocking additional loadout slots past the usual 10 with cat food after acquiring a specific amount of medals. 25 medals unlocked slot 11, 50 medals unlocked slot 12, 60 medals unlocked slot 13, 70 medals unlocked slot 14, and etc, etc, etc. Version 9.3 adds the addition of gauntlet stages. These stages can only be played a specific amount of times before needing to go on cooldown before you can play them again, with the first gauntlet stage being added are the 3 Barren Seal stages. Speaking of which, before these stages were given an official name, the name Barren Stages became the common term used to describe these sorts of stages, and some people still refer to gauntlets as Barren Stages to this day. Now, generally, I mostly avoided discussing one unit in particular outside of Awakened Bahamut, but in version 9.5, a brand new Epic Fest Uber would be added, and to say this Uber was a little busted. This, of course, being Kazli, Daughter of Chaos. Back when she was released, she was just seen as a strong but not too overbearing of a unit, and many folks are saying that Mitama was still the better Fest unit, but as more and more people began to test her out in a wide variety of situations, it became pretty clear that this unit was easily one of the best, if not the best Uber in the entire game. The reason why she wasn't seen as the real powerhouse at the time was because a ton of people were too focused on the fact that her main ability was Curse, completely ignoring the rest of her kit. Her kit, including her curse, would quickly show that in a lot of situations, why would anyone need to worry about things like slow when you can just put the enemy 6 feet under, or shut down several enemies because of their whole gimmick would be disabled, like Henry, Wing Piggy, or basically every relic enemy. Again, Lucas has another amazing video discussing the impact Dazly has had on the meta if you wanted a more detailed explanation on why this Uber was so controversial, so check out that video as well when you're done with this one. Version 9.7 adds the addition of Talent Orbs, which gives units the ability to either raise their attack or boost their defense against a specific trait, except Metal, as these only get defense orbs. These traits being Red, Black, Floating, Metal, Angel, Alien, and Zombie. The boosts granted are independent from any sort of ability. These orbs would be attained through newly added Enigma stages, which would have the player face off against a specific trait of enemies and acquire the trait's respective orbs. The more difficult the stage was, the better the orb rank could be. These orb ranks from weakest to strongest went from D, C, B, A, and S rank orbs. Attack orbs would boost a unit's damage by a flat rate with their initial attack power at level 1 even before treasures. To give an example, Luxury Bathcat has an initial attack stat of 600, meaning that by using a rank S red attack orb, they would be able to deal 3000 more damage against a red enemy, regardless of the massive damage boost or not. Some orbs can be useful in helping with crossing some enemy HP thresholds, but generally weren't seen as worth it for a lot of units. The defense orbs gave a flat damage reduction, taking the unit's current max health as the baseline. For example, level 50 Talented Row had an effective health stat of 615,600 health against red enemies. With the rank S defense orb, you could boost this effective health to 769,000 health. These talent orbs also had another property. You could exchange them for NP, giving you more reasons to farm them, as NP can be rather scarce at times, so farming orbs D or S rank would give some much needed NP if need be. Before version 9.8, only select units could apply talent orbs, these being Chill, Catasaurus, Goemon, Doctor, Enchantress, Elemental Duelist, Rodeo, Can-Can, Rocat, Fishman, Luxury Bath, Tathagata, Cataphone, Ice Crystal, Immortal Nobunaga and Shingen, Divine Windy and Thandia, God Emperor Megidora and Sodom, and the Chaos Moon could have talent orbs. Now any units with talents can have an orb applied. Version 10.7 would add the remaining massive damage, strong, and resist orbs, but the main thing that needs to be noted is that they usually tend to be better than the standard attack and defense orbs in most situations. Version 9.9, while being a smaller update in terms of total content added, is still very major. This is because this marks the 100% completion of Stories of Legend, as the 4-star Laboratory of Relics released. Not only did this mark the end of Stories of Legend, they also had added a secret stage after beating every single subchapter up to the 4-star difficulty. This stage was the Eldritch Forces Invasion. This featured a brand new secret boss in Edie Ray, a powerful relic foe that you had to take down with only being able to use special and rare units. However, unlike Mechabun, this reward was very much worth the journey, as this gave players what was essentially a second awakened Bahamut. Edie N2, although having a weaker base attack stat and was slower than Bahamut, had things that helped make her a very valuable asset for Uncanny Legends. She was bulkier, surge immune, and most importantly, dealt massive damage against relic enemies. This unit would also make a bunch of rush strategies much more possible for a lot more people, especially if they had lacked Immortal Yukimura. 10.0 was a major update for many of the purchasable units that had been neglected for years, due to most of them having rather poor stats. However, this update gave these special units talents. However, what was unique about their talents is that instead of receiving the usual 20% boost to their stats, these units gained a massive 80% boost to their stats. This massive stat boost would give new life to many units like Dark Laser, Dancer, and Riceball Cat. While some of these units were fine for 4-star, these talents would breathe new life into some of these units, giving them much more usage. Some of them would become meta staples, to even the point where one of the Stories of Legend units gets absolutely dunked on by Michael Jackson. While version 10.8 had teased the new Aku enemies, version 10.9 adds a brand new entire story chapter, this being the Aku Realms, adding a whole new set of stages with a brand new mechanic called the Aku Altar, forcing units with higher levels to effectively become level 1. However, as you progress through the Aku Realms, your units would get stronger and stronger by breaking the Aku seal in each area. Now what about these Aku enemies themselves? This enemy type introduces two brand new mechanics. These being the Aku Shield and the Death Surge. The Aku Shield has a set amount of health, but unlike the barrier, you can slowly break it by simply hitting the enemy's shield. For some enemies, however, their shield health is way more massive than even the strongest of barriers, and the health is tied to enemy magnification instead of being a flat number. The shield can also regenerate if an enemy has a knockback, meaning you need to have a plan to break it quickly on some enemies, either through strong brute force or a shield piercer. The second mechanic is the Death Surge. Simply put, it's a surge that spawns when an enemy dies. These act sort of as a last-ditch effort for the enemy to try killing your units. This story mode has 3 boss battles, 2 with different versions of Mammon, and 1 with Lord of Ruin Gigando, who is a secret boss similar to Filibuster and Edie, where if you defeat them, you gain a unit. And this unit being a dedicated anti-trait list makes them valuable, especially if one lacks a Fest unit. Version 11.0 comes swinging by adding the inverse of the Heavenly Tower. this being the Infernal Tower, with much more absurd enemy combinations and with a heavier focus on Relic and Aqua enemies. You could only unlock this event by beating floor 40 of the Heavenly Tower. The boss this time around is a Relic variant of Hermit Cat, who deals more damage and curses all who they hit. However, since there have been way more anti-wave units added since the original floor 30, this stage tended to be way easier for those that could reach this floor. The following update adds a brand new basic cat, something that would have ever been thought to be possible up to this point, as we've had the original 9 since that old flip phone version of the game, yet here was Super Feline. This unit was also only obtainable once you beat Cats of the Cosmos Chapter 3 and could only be pulled from the Silver Gacha, making them a huge anomaly of the basic cat family. Once again, teased in version 11.4 with Wild Doge and Ancient Egg N001 comes the Behemoth update in version 11.5. This update adds a brand new evolution material called the Behemoth Stone, which would be required to use to hatch open some of these eggs that were added. One of these eggs in particular had a massive impact not only on this new meta immediately, but had shaken up so much of the early game to the core. This unit being Courier Cat, having really good stats for when you can obtain them, as you only need to clear 5 of these Behemoth culling stages to get the egg, and acquire only 5 red and purple Behemoth stones. This unit was fast and hit hard, being able to quickly chop down a lot of enemies, made most red enemies die in a matter of seconds, and basically steamrolled most of the early game. If you want to know why Courier was so controversial, I have a video here that you can check out, but do that after you're done with this video. Even nowadays, Courier still remains the best egg unit in the game, though there have been a few that came close to overthrowing them. About Behemoths themselves, they were also met with mixed results, as the grinding of stones was even more tedious than Cat Fruit, as you could only play one of each map a day, and the stages had a chance to only give you base materials. However, the latter bit would be remedied in the next update with them adding new stages to the 3 maps, but these stages would be unlocked behind some tough boss fights. A few updates later came swinging hard with version 12.0, marking the end of Uncanny Legends and adding the Underground Labyrinth, which hasn't been present in the English version for over a year at the time of this video's release. The end of Uncanny Legends granted all the previously unlocked legend units in Uncanny Legends a brand new true form, granting them all Behemoth Slayer and Colossus Slayer alongside other buffs. These additions would be very important, as they were meant to help with the brand new final bosses of Uncanny Legends, these being the Luza twins. Great Ape Luza is a relic behemoth enemy that hits hard, but could be quashed quickly with proper planning with these new true forms. Once you beat Humanity Catified, you would unlock a new subchapter, the Sacred Forest. And here was the previous Luza boss you fought, powered up by the Tree of Life, giving them much more health, much more damage and range, and swapping the Behemoth subtrait for the Colossus subtrait, a much more difficult subtrait to fight due to how each of the stats multiply between the two. This final boss has the player facing an onslaught of peon enemies with Zero Luza nearly always within arm's reach of the base. The reception the Zero Luza boss fight had received was much more positive than Mechabuns due to how each of the battles flowed and how you can't just invalidate one of them with crowd control effects. Upon clearing Revival of Origin, you would receive an egg for one of the strongest legend units, but to crack this egg open, you would have to pay a hefty fee. Also, you would unlock the brand new saga, Zero Legends, with Meta Filibuster serving as the first boss. A whole new world would be a remake of the Filibuster fight with all the supporting enemies being behemoths, and to stand out with this one was Megamajo, as this enemy was beefy if you lacked the UL true forms. Clearing this stage would grant you the ability to true form Filibuster. The second major feature added was the Underground Labyrinth, a major event that would make players dive into the depths of the Grand Deep and face off against 99 randomized stages, all getting harder as the player descended. You would make a lineup for these stages, and every stage you cleared, some of your units would get captured and you couldn't use them for the rest of the journey. Sometimes, you would have the chance to rescue a unit, making it vital you brought units you could discard early, such as weaker collab units first before bringing your stronger units. This also adds the Dark Cat's Eye, an elusive item that allows Uber rares to go to level 60. While for now this would just help Ubers like Balrog to even greater heights, this feature would become very important later. Speaking of later, here comes version 12.1 with the addition of Ultra Talents. These Ultra Talents are additional talents given to units that already have talents, and to acquire said Ultra Talents, you would need to get an Uber to level 60. The Ubers that first received Ultra Talents were God Emperor Megidora, Inferno Akira, and biggest of them all, Divine Coup, who gained a brand new type of talent. this being the attack frequency up talents, or colloquially known as the TBA reduction talents. This ultra talent would allow a unit to attack much more frequently, giving them a massive boost to their DPS for offensive units, such as Q's case, or they can increase the uptime for a crowd controller's effects, such as Divine Coppermine when she received hers in version 12.5. The cost of ultra talents would depend on what type of talent it was. Resist talents, or talents that would boost a unit's already existing ability, would cost a max of 225 NP to upgrade. If it was a new ability that could be leveled up, this would cost 285 NP. Lastly, if it was a new ability or effect that can't be leveled up, it would cost 150 NP to unlock said ability. The update after in 12.2 would see a change in how the base and foundation upgrades to the cap base would function, as now they will have an actual effect in battle. Upgrading these two parts of the cap base required a brand new type of construction material called the Z materials. These items could be acquired by playing Zero Legends or by converting one of your existing materials into a Z material. This functionality would be unlocked after beating an ancient curse. These upgrades will give different resistances depending on what foundation or style would be upgraded. The foundations would reduce damage from these following enemy traits up to 15%, and the styles would reduce the effects of enemy abilities by 15%, either by reducing their uptime or reducing how much damage they deal. These effects do stack, so for example, if you had the Water Blast style and foundation fully upgraded, the surge damage from a 200% red energy would get reduced to 72.25% of the original damage, dealing only a total of 19,623 damage instead of the full 27,160 damage. These would be very useful additions in making the very boosted 3-star Uncanny Legends a little bit more manageable to do. The game would receive some more updates that didn't really add anything fundamentally game-changing, with the biggest of these being version 12.7 with the end of Behemoth calling stages and the brainwashed unit true forms, but this would all change in version 13.0. This update adds something that was not seen since back all the way in version 2.0, this being the addition of a brand new form that a unit could acquire with the Ultra Forms. These Ultra Forms, unlike talents or even Ultra Talents, can be used as a way to change the fundamentals of a unit. For example, Phantasmal Nobunaga gained an increased knockback count from 1 to 2, Ultimate Windy gained a higher standing range, insane damage, and a much faster attack animation. Last was Ascendant Dio Ramos, whose attack range was split into a long distance multi-hit that can pierce further back while still delivering the full force of damage in their usual range. Just as the Ultra Talents required units to get to level 60 to have access to them, you would need level 60 in order to evolve these units, alongside some rather expensive evolution items like Gold Cat Fruits or Behemoth Gems. These Ultra Forms, like the Ultra Talents that came before, were met with mixed reactions, but this is mainly due to them being tied to the Dark Cat's Eye item, which was very hard to come by, and to an extent, they still are. However, these Ultra Forms would be an opportunity for opponents to fix the fundamental flaws with some units that they can't with simple talents. The following update, version 13.1, adds a brand new sub-trait. However, unlike Colossus or Behemoth, having this sub-trait buffs the enemies directly, this being the Sage sub-trait. Sage enemies resist all forms of crowd control by 70%. For example, Can Slow would go from 4.8 seconds to a much shorter 1.44 seconds against Sage Red or alien enemies. The Sage trait was first introduced in adherence to Virtue with Sage of Mind Sorectis. This stage is generally regarded as one of the most difficult stages in the game, in part to Sorectis' immense pushing power, along with the crowd control resist that is inherent to Sage enemies. A new ability was also added, this being the Sage Slayer. Sage Slayers will have double health, deal 1.2 times damage against Sage enemies, and have a 70% reduction to crowd control effects from Sage enemies. For example, if Joyful Nurse had her Sage Slayer Ultra Talents along with her Stat Talents, she will have 218,880 health, deal 103,910 damage, and will only be frozen by Sorectis for 0.6 seconds. Sage Slayers also bypass the Sage enemy's crowd control reduction, so Nurse would be able to slow Sorectis for a full 4.8 seconds. Along with the Sage sub-trait in this update, also came along a whole new way of how a unit functions with the Conjure mechanic. Units that have this attribute are able to summon a spirit version of themselves, dealing damage and applying a status effect. Said effect is unit dependent, as some units weaken, some knock back, and some even freeze. Mastermind Kakrates has a conjure, which when summoned will weaken every single enemy they hit for 6.67 seconds, along with dealing some damage. These conjured spirits cannot be attacked, but will disappear once they have attacked. These spirits can only be sent out once per unit summon, so timing when to use said summon is key to fully utilizing their power. For the units themselves, if they have a conjure, then only one of them can be out on the field at a time, meaning you will not be able to stack them. The damage of the spirit is tied to the conjurer's level, so if the conjurer was level 30, then the spirit will deal 45,900 damage. If the conjurer is level 50, then the spirit will deal 72,900 damage. The last major update to have been released as of this video is, well, the most recent update, being version 13.6. This update adds a long requested feature that many people would have loved to have years ago. This, of course, being the ability to link your BattleCats account with either your Apple ID or your Google account. However, this isn't exactly saving it to some sort of cloud, but rather it binds your save to one of these accounts, meaning that once you link your save to one of these accounts, you could very easily transfer your save to a brand new device. This is amazing for those who are worried that they might accidentally delete a game or if your phone gets broken, as this makes account transferring much simpler to do. However, it is still highly encouraged to keep your inquiry code somewhere in case you have difficulties restoring your account. And with that, this was a long but hopefully comprehensive history of the BattleCats. The game has gone over many changes and updates, and even whole apps, starting from the days of the flip phone to the newest mobile phones and a few side projects on the Nintendo DS and Switch. This game has been around for a long time, but for the current English version, I want to wish you a happy 10th anniversary. If you thought this video gave a well-documented look at the various changes this game has went through, then be sure to give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy the content on this channel. And I want to know, when did you start playing the BattleCats? Let me know in the comments down below, but for me personally, I started playing right around when the Pen Pineapple Apple Pen collab was happening. Also, shout out to the following channel members: Something YouTube, Potato King, and Dr. Deadly for being gold members, as well as Athani and Uberlist for being silver members. If you want to receive a shout out like these fine channel members here, then be sure to become a channel member today, as it's a way that helps support what I do in a way that keeps the lights on. Members also receive an exclusive role on my Discord server, for which you can find a link to down below. Anyways, I hope you have a wonderful day, and have a happy 10th anniversary, BattleCats.